My son, David, handed me my heart medication this morning. He watched me take it, his eyes filled with that fake, sticky pity. "You're looking tired, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Why don't you go rest?" What I heard was, "Hurry up and die, old man." For the last 6 months, ever since my wife Mary passed, I've been playing the part of a senile old widower. And my son, along with my best friend Jim, have been my directors. They think I'm losing my mind. Jim, my neighbor of 30 years, the man I watched football with every Sunday, helpfully reminds me to lock my own doors. David helps manage my finances. They whisper to relatives on the phone that I'm not all there and becoming a danger to myself. But I know exactly what they're doing. They are methodically, cruelly building a legal case to have me declared incompetent. They want my house, my savings, everything Mary and I built. They want to put me in a state-run home and forget I exist. This isn't just a story about greed, it's about the deepest betrayal a man can face. If you want to see how a so-called senile old man turns the tables on his predators, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The fog of grief is real. When Mary, my wife of 49 years, died from the cancer, my world didn't just go dark, it dissolved. The first 2 months are a blur. I was helpless. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I probably did seem senile. And David and Jim were there every single day. David brought groceries. Jim mowed the lawn. They were my rocks. "We'll get you through this, Jack," Jim would say, putting his arm around me. I trusted them. I loved them. I leaned on them with my full weight. The old accountant in me woke up by accident. It was about 3 months in. David was handling my mail. "To reduce your stress, Dad," he'd said. He handed me a small stack of papers to sign. "Just some standard estate stuff, Dad, settling Mary's accounts." I was exhausted. I trusted him. I picked up the pen, and I paused. My hand hovered over the signature line. It was a transfer of assets form, and the recipient wasn't the estate account. It was a holding company I had never heard of. I looked up at him. "What's this, David?" He smiled, that easy, reassuring smile. "Just a formality, Dad, to move things into a simpler account, easier to manage." But my old instincts, buried under months of grief, kicked in. I'm an accountant. I've seen this exact smile before, in boardrooms, right before a company collapsed. "I think I'll read this over later," I said, putting the pen down. "I'm a bit tired now." His smile tightened. It was only for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. It wasn't concern. It was impatience. And in that tiny moment, the fog of my grief began to clear, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling where the shadows from the streetlights danced. The man in the next room, my son David, was a stranger. The man next door, Jim, was an enemy. The grief for Mary was still a heavy blanket, but now, underneath it, something else was burning, a cold, methodical anger. They wanted me to be incompetent? Fine. I would give them the performance of a lifetime. My transformation began the next morning. I forgot Jim's name. I called him Tim or John. I'd watch him and David exchange that knowing, patronizing glance. I started misplacing my reading glasses only to have them found by David in the refrigerator. "See, Dad? This is what we're worried about." I would nod, looking confused and ashamed. "I just don't know what's wrong with me," I'd murmur. The more incompetent I acted, the more confident and careless they became. My next step was securing my tools. I am an old accountant, not a spy, but I know how to cover my tracks. I took a bus to a different part of town and used cash to buy 3 small nanny cams, the kind that look like phone chargers or alarm clocks. I also bought a handful of tiny digital audio recorders. When David asked about the bag, I told him they were new smoke detectors. My old friend from the lodge said these were the best. He said they even listen for, the sound of the fire. He patted my shoulder. "Sure, Dad. Whatever makes you feel safe." I placed the first camera in a fake plant in the living room, overlooking the armchair where I napped. I put the second in my home office, hidden on the bookshelf, aimed directly at my desk and the guest chair. The third went into the kitchen, taped underneath the cabinet, pointing at the kitchen table. This is where they held their meetings about my care while I was supposedly watching TV. I didn't have to wait long. That Friday, I was dozing in my armchair, the tiny audio recorder active in my robe pocket. Jim and David were at the kitchen table, their voices low. I heard Jim laugh. "He called me Tim again today," Jim said, his voice full of mockery. "He's really slipping fast, David." "It's perfect," David replied. His voice was cold, all fake pity gone. "I spoke to the lawyer. He said if we can get Dr. Evans to document just 2 or 3 more severe cognitive episodes, like him wandering off or a small accident in the house, the judge will fast-track the competency hearing." There was a pause. Then I heard Jim's voice, darker now. "An accident? What are you thinking?" "Nothing big," David said quickly. "Just maybe he forgets to turn off the stove or leaves the front door wide open all night, something to show he's a danger to himself. We just need to help his forgetfulness along." I didn't move. I kept my breathing slow and even, pretending to be deep in sleep. But under my closed eyelids, my eyes were wide open. They weren't just going to wait for me to fail. They were going to create the failure. They were going to set a trap. And I, the old senile fool, was going to have to be 2 steps ahead of them. I didn't have to wait long for them to help my forgetfulness along. 2 days later, Jim came over while David was at the grocery store. I was playing the part sitting in my armchair in the living room, staring blankly at a game show I didn't see. My digital recorder was running in my pocket. "Hey, Jack," Jim said, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Figured I'd make us some coffee. You look like you need a pick-me-up." I looked at him, blinking slowly. "Coffee? Oh, that's nice, John." He chuckled. "It's Jim, buddy. Don't worry, I've got this." He bustled into the kitchen, right into the view of the camera, hidden under the cabinet. I heard him clattering mugs, running the water. Then I heard the click, click, click of the gas stove igniter, followed by the whoosh of the flame. He came back into the living room, empty-handed. "You know, Jack," he said, standing where I could clearly see him, "I think I'll use the restroom before I go. You just rest there." He disappeared down the hall. I waited. The kitchen was silent. No kettle whistling, no smell of coffee. Just silence. I strained my ears. I heard the front door open and quietly close. He hadn't gone to the restroom. He had left. I sat still for 1 full minute, counting in my head. Then I got up. The senile fog lifted from my face instantly. I walked into the kitchen. The scene was chilling in its simplicity. He hadn't left a pot to boil over. He had done something worse. He had turned on the gas burner, let the flame light, and then he must have gently blown it out. The gas was now silently, invisibly pouring into my kitchen. My camera had caught it all. His face illuminated by the stove's blue flame, the way he glanced back toward the living room, and then the deliberate puff of his cheeks as he extinguished the fire, leaving the knob turned to high. I didn't panic. An accountant doesn't panic. He mitigates risk. I immediately opened the kitchen window and the back door. I walked over, put on a pair of rubber dish gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints on the knob, and turned the stove off. I went back to the living room and picked up the audio recorder from my pocket. I listened to the sound of Jim entering, his fake, cheerful voice, and then the sound of the front door closing. Evidence 1A and 1B. I went to my office. I pulled out a simple, old-fashioned accounting ledger from my desk drawer. On the first page, I wrote the date. In the item column, I wrote stove incident. In the debit column, I wrote Jim attempted harm. In the credit column, I wrote Nanny Cam 3 video evidence. They weren't just building a case for incompetence anymore. They had just shown me they were willing to stage an accident that could have easily ended my life. The game had changed. They thought they were writing my last chapter. They didn't realize I was the one keeping the books. After the incident with the stove, Jim kept his distance. He'd still come over, but he was skittish, like he was afraid I'd accuse him of something. But David was different. His false concern became more aggressive, his impatience barely hidden. The accident hadn't worked, and now they seemed determined to rush the legal process. David made his move next. It happened on a Tuesday. I was in the living room having lost my wallet, which was, in reality, tucked under my chair cushion. I was patting my pockets, muttering, "Where is it? Where—" I must have set it down again. David entered with a deep theatrical sigh. "Dad, it's in your hand. You were holding it 5 minutes ago." This was a lie. I wasn't. He was just reinforcing the narrative. Oh, of course," I said, acting flustered. "While I'm here," David said, sitting across from me, closer than usual. The office camera couldn't see him, but the mini recorder in my pocket was picking up every word. "There's just one small paper from the bank. It's just to let me pay your electricity bill easier. You don't want the lights turned off, do you?" He handed me a folder. It wasn't a bank paper. It was a general power of attorney, full, irrevocable control over my entire estate, my medical decisions, my life. It was the legal key to everything. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. This time, it was real. Not from age, but from rage. Okay, son. You're so good to me," I whispered. "Of course, Dad. Just sign right here." He pointed his finger at the signature line. I leaned over the paper. I could see him drumming his fingers on his knee, impatient. He thought he had won. I brought the pen down to the paper and accidentally dropped it on the floor. "Oh, bother," I whimpered. "I'll get it." David instantly lunged down. This was my moment. A glass of water sat on the side table. As David was coming back up, my trembling hand swept the glass, accidentally, knocking a stream of water across the table. The water didn't hit the document, but it created chaos. "Ah, Dad, watch it!" David yelled, instinctively snatching the folder away from the non-existent threat. His face contorted in fury. The caring son mask was gone for 2 solid seconds. He was wet, angry, and he had lost this round. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so clumsy. I didn't mean to—" I babbled, looking like I was about to cry. David took a deep breath, pulling the smile back onto his face. "It's fine, Dad. No harm done. We'll do this later, when you're feeling better." He left, taking the folder with him. I was alone in the living room. I stopped shaking. I went to my office and opened the ledger. Date, today, item, power of attorney. Debit, David, attempted full control. Credit, glass of water, tactical delay. Audio file 004, proof of coercion. I now had proof of his intentions, and I had proven to myself that I could still outthink him. David and Jim were desperate. My accidental save on the power of attorney had rattled them. I heard them whispering in the kitchen again, right under the camera. Their plan to lose me had failed, and now they were going for a more direct approach. They were going to create the wandering incident themselves. "We'll take him to the park," David said, his voice low and tense. "The big one, by the river. You go for hot dogs, I go to the car, and we just leave him on a bench." Jim hesitated. "What if someone helps him? What if he finds his way back?" "He won't." David's voice was ice. "I'll hold his wallet and phone for safekeeping. He'll just be a confused old man with no ID. We wait an hour, call the police in a total panic. That's the severe cognitive episode the lawyer needs." The next day, it was all smiles. "Beautiful day, Dad. Let's get some fresh air." I played my part. I shuffled my feet. I let David help me into the car. At the park, they sat me on a bench far from the entrance. "Wait right here, Dad. We'll be right back with hot dogs." My hand was in my pocket, gripping the audio recorder. I had their words on tape. They walked away. I watched them disappear behind the trees. They thought I was a pawn. They forgot I'm a strategist. I waited exactly 5 minutes. Then I reached into my left sock. I pulled out the small, cheap burner phone I'd bought with the cameras. I hadn't just prepared for their attacks, I'd prepared for their strategy. I already had the taxi app installed. An hour later, when David and Jim burst through the front door, their faces were masks of fake panic, phones in hand, ready to dial 911. They froze. I was sitting in my armchair, reading the morning paper. I looked up at them over my glasses. "Oh, hello, boys. You were gone a long time. It got chilly in the park, so I came home. You really should have left me cab money." David's face went from pale to purple. Jim just stared, his mouth open. I had just checkmated them in their biggest play. That night, I opened my ledger. Item: The Wandering Gambit. Debit: David and Jim. Credit: burner phone and taxi app. Balance: my move. They were running out of options, and I knew the next move would be desperate. I could see the real panic in their eyes. Their subtle attempts had failed. Their plan to lose me in the park hadn't just backfired, it proved I was sharper than they were. Time was running out. They knew I could just sell the house and leave, and all their work would be for nothing. They needed the doctor. Plan B was simple. If they couldn't create an episode, they would stage a medical examination. David came into the living room a few days after the park fiasco. He was all concern again. "Dad, I know you haven't been yourself lately. I arranged for our old friend Dr. Evans to stop by and check on you. Just a friendly visit. He's in the neighborhood anyway." I had my pocket recorder running. Dr. Evans, the same man they'd mentioned in the kitchen. This wasn't a friendly visit. This was an ambush. They were going to corner me, hoping my dementia would be obvious to a professional. They didn't know I'd had weeks to prepare. When I said I was going to the library to read old newspapers, I was really on their computers. The old accountant had been auditing not just his finances, but his enemies. I had been researching Dr. Evans, and I had also been researching David. On the day of the visit, I put on my best robe, the one Mary gave me on our last anniversary. I looked frail, but clean. The living room camera was ready. The recorder was in my pocket. David, Jim, and a tall man in a suit with kind, tired eyes, Dr. Evans, walked in. "Dad, you remember Dr. Evans, don't you?" David started. I squinted. Evans. Yeah, the name sounds familiar." David and Jim exchanged a triumphant look. This is it, they thought. He doesn't remember him. I slowly got to my feet, looking right past the doctor at David. Yes, I remember now. Dr. Evans. He's the specialist who treated you, David, when you had your problems, when you gambled away the college fund for the grandkids. The room went absolutely silent. David's face turned white as a sheet. Jim froze. Dr. Evans's head slowly turned from me to David, his expression now one of sharp professional curiosity. I turned back to the doctor, giving him a frail, senile smile. "Thank you for coming, doctor. My son worries so much about me. But as you can see, I'm the one who has always had to worry about him." I hadn't just dodged the bullet. I had handed it back to them. The doctor was no longer looking at me as the patient. He was looking at my son as an unreliable, high-risk guardian with a hidden motive. After Dr. Evans left, casting a long, thoughtful look back at David, the house fell silent. But it was a loud, heavy silence, the kind that comes before a lightning strike. I knew the caring son mask had finally cracked. I was sitting in my office at my desk. My ledger was open. This time, I wasn't writing anything. I was just waiting. I no longer needed to play the senile old man. The game was entering its final stage. My office door didn't open. It slammed against the wall. David stormed in. His face was purple, his fists clenched. Jim hovered behind him, pale and nervous, like a lackey who had ushered in an angry king. "What the hell did you do?" David hissed, his voice trembling with rage. I calmly looked up. "I told the doctor the truth, David, something you seem to be having trouble with lately." My calm broke him. It was like throwing a match on gasoline. The recorder in my half-open desk drawer was running. "You old fool," he shouted, stepping toward my desk. "You think you're smart? You think this is funny? You're a relic. You're just sitting here, on our future, letting it rot." Jim grabbed his elbow. "David, calm down. Not now." "No, Jim, I'm done." He yanked his arm free. "We have babied him for 6 months. We put up with his whining, his forgetfulness. You owe us, old man. You owe us for all this time." I looked at him with the cold, flat stare of an accountant. I was tallying the damages. "Owe you?" "Yes, owe us. You should have signed those papers. You deserved what Jim did with the stove. We are trying to help ourselves because you're too selfish to just get out of the way." That was it. That was what I was waiting for. The direct confession. He was breathing heavily, glaring at me. But I wasn't a frail old man anymore. I was his judge. I slowly closed the ledger. "Is that all, David?" My voice was level and quiet. He suddenly realized what he had said, and who he had said it to. He looked at me, then at Jim, and his rage faltered, replaced by something that looked like fear. He turned and stormed out of the room. Jim scrambled after him. I waited until I heard the front door slam. I pressed stop on the recorder. I had everything. The stove, the power of attorney, the park, and now a full, raging, undeniable confession. My case was complete. After the explosion, the house was dead silent. David and Jim avoided me. They were probably on the phone with their lawyer, trying to figure out how to spin the disastrous doctor's visit. They were scared, but I knew they weren't defeated. They were cornered animals, which made them more dangerous. I couldn't just call the police. That was too simple. That wasn't accounting. An accountant doesn't just want his money back. He wants the books balanced, publicly. I needed one final stage for my audit, and I knew exactly what it would be. I found David in the kitchen 2 days later. He was nervously drinking coffee, his hands shaking. Jim was at the table, looking pale and sick. "David," I said. My voice was quiet, not angry, not senile, just old. "Jim, sit down for a minute." They eyed me suspiciously, but they sat. "You were right about one thing," I started, and their heads snapped up, surprised. "I've been difficult. Since Mary passed, I've been angry. I pushed you both away. I said things I shouldn't have said to the doctor. It was out of line." I let that sink in. They were confused. "I'm tired of fighting," I said, looking down at my hands. "Next Saturday, it would have been our 50th anniversary, Mary's golden anniversary." I looked at David. His expression softened, just a fraction. "She wouldn't have wanted this," I continued. "Not all this anger. I want to have a small memorial dinner, just us, you, your wife, the grandkids, to remember her, not to fight. A peace offering." David and Jim looked at each other. I could see the gears turning in their heads. Is he serious? Is he broken? This was their new chance, a public gathering, a place where they could look like the caring, forgiving family, and I'd be the remorseful old man. It was the perfect way to undo the damage I'd done. "Dad," David said, his caring voice, slowly returning like a snake shedding its skin. "That's a wonderful idea. It's exactly what Mom would have wanted." "Yes," Jim chimed in, eager to play along. "A celebration of her life. We'll handle everything." "Good," I said, pushing myself up from the chair. "I'm very tired. I'll let you two handle all the arrangements, whatever you think is best." They practically leapt at the chance. "Of course, Dad. Don't you worry about a thing. You just rest." I nodded and walked slowly to my office. I closed the door. They thought they were planning a memorial dinner. I was planning an audit. I took out my ledger, my book of debts. I grabbed the small USB drive that held 6 months of video, audio, and financial records, and I began preparing my final presentation. The dinner was perfect. David's wife, Susan, had brought Mary's favorite flowers. My grandkids, 16 and 19, were there, looking uncomfortable in their nice clothes. David and Jim were the perfect hosts, filling glasses, telling old, happy stories about Mary. They were laying it on so thick, I almost choked on my food. After dessert, David stood up, raising his glass. His eyes were glistening with fake tears. "To Mom," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. "She was the best. And to Dad, for being so strong. We're just so glad we could be here to support him through this." Jim nodded, raising his own glass. "To Jack, a great man and a true friend." The room looked at me. My granddaughter was smiling at me, her eyes full of love. This was it. I stood up slowly, holding my water glass. "Thank you, David. Thank you, Jim. You've both supported me more than I ever realized." I walked over to the large flat-screen TV in the living room, where they had been playing a slideshow of old family photos. "You've all been so worried about my episodes," I said, my voice clear and steady. "And as an old accountant, I believe in keeping clean books. So for the past 6 months, I've been running an audit. I thought, in memory of Mary, we could review the final ledger together." David and Jim exchanged a confused, nervous look. I plugged a USB drive into the TV, the screen flickered, and the photo slideshow was replaced by a simple file menu. "I don't have dementia," I said, turning to face them. The grandkids looked shocked. Susan's smile froze. "But you two wished I did." I clicked the first file. It wasn't a video, it was an audio file, and the speakers filled the room with David's voice, screaming. "Audio. You old fool. You deserved what Jim did with the stove. We are trying to help ourselves because you're too selfish to just get out of the way." Susan let out a small, strangled gasp. My grandson stood up. What is that?" "That," I said, "was my son confessing to Jim's attempt to create an accident with my gas stove." Jim looked like he was going to be sick. I clicked the next file. Audio again. The kitchen. Audio. Jim. "An accident? What are you thinking?" David. "Nothing big. Maybe he forgets to turn off the stove." I clicked the next. Audio from the park. Audio. "We just leave him on a bench. A confused old man with no ID." By now Susan was weeping, backing away from her husband. "David, what is this?" "This," I said, "is the debit column." I clicked to the final slide. It wasn't a number. It was a scanned legal document. The Mary and Jack Grandchildren's Trust. "I hired a real lawyer last week," I said quietly, my eyes locked on David and Jim. "My entire estate, this house, the savings, every dime Mary and I ever built, is already in it. You, David, are not the executor. You are not even a beneficiary. Your children are." David's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You wanted to have me declared incompetent," I said, pulling the USB drive from the TV. The screen went black, plunging the room into a terrible silence. "You wanted everything. But in accounting, a zero balance is also a final, balanced number, and that is what you both get. 0. I looked at David. I looked at Jim. My voice was cold, and for the first time in 6 months, it was not an act. "Now, get out of my wife's house." They left. Susan was sobbing, dragging David by the arm. He looked empty, hollowed out. Jim didn't even look back. He just shuffled out the door like a defeated ghost. My grandchildren, however, stayed. My granddaughter, Chloe, was the first to move. She walked over to me, tears streaming down her face, and just hugged me. "I had no idea, Grandpa," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." My grandson, Ryan, just looked at the empty doorway, his face hard. "Good riddance," he said. I didn't call the police. Prison is a messy solution, and the legal system is slow. An accountant likes clean, balanced books. A zero balance. That's a perfect final entry. From what I hear, Jim's wife left him the following week. The entire neighborhood found out. His reputation is gone. David and Susan are in the middle of a nasty divorce. He lost his wife, his children's respect, and his inheritance, all in one night. The case they were building against me was simply closed. My grandkids and I, we're healing. They come over for dinner now. No faking, no lies. The trust is in their name, but they won't see a dime until they're 25. Mary would have wanted them to build their own lives first. I sleep soundly now. The house is quiet, but it's my quiet. But sometimes I do wonder, did I do the right thing? Was a public audit too cold, too permanent? What would you have done in my place? This was my story, but there are thousands more just like it. If you want to hear more true stories of justice where the score is finally settled, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss an update. Please hit the like button if you think my final audit was the right call, and let me know in the comments exactly what you would have done to David and Jim. I'll be reading. Everyone, thank you for listening.